they can just haul the same trailer with the same trucks, and we opportunistically add electric power. And that's what you get when it's a separate vehicle. It allows you to just insert it when it makes sense and pull it off when it doesn't make sense.
I'm wondering if you can just kind of explain broadly this technology your company's working on. It's pretty interesting, and of course, right now, a very hot topic. Again, broadly speaking, what is this technology? How does it work?
Yeah, totally. So what Revo does is we make a electric vehicle, and what it does is it instantly integrates with any semi truck on the road today, regardless of age, anything, um, and it brings in zero emissions power to the vehicle, which reduces the load on the diesel engine and increases fuel efficiency by as high as 70 to 80%. And in fact, we hit a new record of 120 mpg several weeks ago, which is just a huge step up in terms of the fuel efficiency of these trucks. And the really two important things that we can do is we can do this at cost parity or below with diesel. And we can do it without any payload impact. So we never displace any payload, which is a pretty unique trait of any electric vehicle technology in the industry.
I'm wondering if you can describe for folks who can't see this, of course, because this
Yeah,
is, we don't have one of them right here, but describe what this looks like, because it kind of looks to me like a little trailer between the cab and the semi trailer.
absolutely. Yeah, that's a great way to think about it. So high level, the tractor trailer is a modular vehicle, right? There's the trailer and the tractor. And so what we're introducing is a third module. What it does is it sits, and this is the vehicle, it sits in between the tractor and the trailer. It hooks up to the tractor just like a trailer, and nothing more on top of that. So it's just the airlines, the J560, and obviously the upper lower fifth wheel, and then the exact same on the back end. So to the trailer, it looks like a tractor. We then have a pre-charged, and that's what we do for our customers. We install the charging infrastructure. That all basically gets wrapped up into that per mile fee that we charge. That is at cost parity or below with diesel. And it takes that power from the battery pack, puts it out onto its axle, which reduces the load on the engine that's hauling it, right? And that's how we drive the fuel efficiency. In terms of what it looks like, yes, it looks like sort of a trailer, but what it is actually is a dolly. And maybe some of your viewers have seen like the like a Jeep. It really is like a Jeep, but with a battery pack on top of it. But yeah, it's a dolly that basically sits in between the tractor and the trailer and turns it into a diesel electric hybrid in a matter of minutes. It really is super quick.
Um, a lot of folks, of course, when they talk about electrification or hybridization of trucks, they really want to build it into the vehicle. What gave you the idea of doing a separate unit between the tractor and trailer as opposed to going the other way?
It comes down to a lot of things. The first one that I mentioned previously comes down to the payload impact. Um, when you split out the electrification into a self-contained uh, rapidly applied vehicle, it means you can also take it off just as quickly. So what we actually do for our customers is as the trucks enter our yards, we call these yards swapping stations because what they basically do is drop off a spent Revoy EV and pick up a pre-charged one in sort of a refueling process. When they come into the yard, we actually weigh the truck. And if the vehicle overall GVW with our vehicle attached, our vehicle right now weighs 22,000 pounds, so it's not nothing. With if we can fit in that 80,000 pound weight budget, great. We hop on, we provide all these fuel savings. It's great. And if we don't fit, well, we just wave that truck on and they just go back to what they were just before, which was a regular old diesel tractor trailer. And so in both of those situations, they're not having to think about how they load the trailer. They don't have to basically budget for, a battery weight tax, as we sometimes call it. They can just haul the same trailer with the same trucks, and we opportunistically add electric power. And that's what you get when it's a separate vehicle. It allows you to just insert it when it makes sense and pull it off when it doesn't make sense. So it's a very flexible and modular approach to it. So that's reason number one. The other reason for this is that it really makes it possible for it to be at cost parity with diesel. And what that comes down to is utilization. So right now, basically, if you're putting the batteries, for example, in the tractor, for in the case of like a battery electric semi, um, those batteries now are basically strongly tied to the driver, unless, for example, you're slip seating it, which is it's common, but it's not the the primary MO for operation. Um, and so at the end of that driver's hours of service, that asset is now idle, which is totally fine with a diesel. But when you have, a three, four times more expensive electric, you really need to get that thing on the road earning, right? And so by having it be a separate unit, we can actually have it be shared across multiple drivers, and it can actually be either charging or discharging 24 hours a day. And that makes it possible for it to be actually economical for our customers. The other thing that we do, then this is separate from the vehicle topology, is we source the electricity for our customers. So we make sure that the operational expenses, the energy costs are low enough. We also handle maintenance, so no need to think about how to retool a maintenance fleet around a new powertrain. We take care of all of that. So yeah, but getting into the vehicle, that's why it's a separate vehicle, is utilization as well as the payload impact. You also get to do some really cool things. It doubles as a yard tractor. So what we actually do for our customers, and this is one of the things that our customer drivers really like, other than the additional power, that's the big thing everybody likes. But the second thing everybody likes is we run what we call a trailer valet service. So when our customer drivers come into our yard, um, our vehicle actually hops off the back of them all by itself. Right now, we do that remote piloted with essentially an attendant at the swapping station. They go and they park the trailer, or they go and just drop the trailer and grab a new Revoy EV that's fully charged, hook it up, and then hop onto the back of the truck and get back onto the road. That process is extremely quick. It takes about 4 minutes, which is actually faster than filling up a tank of diesel. So that's the other reason, is it allows us to do this like very seamless. Like they don't need to mess with the landing gear. Really, the only reason they need to get out of the truck is for pre-trip inspections. But other than that, they can just be taking a break. So we can also do that.
I'm kind of curious here, and this is getting into the weeds a little bit, but obviously, when you're dealing with two different propulsion systems, the diesel and the electric, the driver has to have some way of signaling to that electric unit, "Hey, it's your time to take over here."
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you can explain it in layman's terms, but how does that trucker signal the unit, "Hey, it's your time to shine, electric thing"?
Yeah, yeah, great question. This is what every driver asks first. Yeah, what is it like to drive? So in terms of how they control the vehicle, they use the exact same things they currently use. So brake pedal, gas pedal, steering wheel, shifter, right? There's no additional interface. The way it works basically is we have sensors in the kingpin of our vehicle that allow us to know what the driver is doing. So when they hit that accelerator pedal, we know immediately, and we just assist with pulling the load. The way that works is essentially it's a force sensor. When you're pulling on it, you can see tension in that force sensor, and then we know what to do in that situation. Same goes for when that Jake brake gets hit, right? That actually then compresses that sensor, and we can then help with braking. We also have a sensor on the service brake line, right? So as soon as the driver hits the brakes, hits that brake pedal, we can detect it actually even before the drum brakes apply and start applying regenerative braking. So that additional braking, not only does that save brake pads, right? Like you are getting assistance on braking, and just inherently less of the energy is going into heat to heating up those brake pads. But it also allows for the tractor to be more nimble. So we can actually shorten the stopping distance of the tractor trailer by about 30% just by the fact that we have additional braking power in the form of regenerative braking. And then what's great about that is that energy isn't just going away, right? It's getting recharged back into the battery, and then that can be used to improve range on the vehicle. The other thing, just on the safety side of things, not only does the additional power on that axle help with braking, it also helps with acceleration. They love the extra power, our customer drivers do. And part of why that is because, it being not, for example, not able to match speed when merging onto a highway, that's inherently dangerous when you have different speeds of traffic trying to merge together. But if you can get a tractor trailer to accelerate up to highway speed on any on ramp, which is largely what we can do, it just makes that process simpler and safer. Same goes for passing, same goes for changing lanes. All that just becomes easier because you're just a more nimble vehicle. So, yeah.
So, looking at one of the big concerns truckers have had with purely electric trucks, range,
Yeah.
how far these things can go. Because, of course, if you're dealing with diesel, you've got a 1,200 to 1,800 mile range on a fill up.
Yeah.
And uh, essentially, I guess you still have that. But how far does the electric have the capability to go on its own on a charge?
Definitely. Yeah. So right now with our current battery pack, which is 525 kilowatt hours, it's approximately 170 miles of all electric range. One thing to note though is unlike a electric semi, it's not the only powertrain on board, right? You still have the diesel powertrain. And so the way we describe our vehicles, it's fail operational. So if you happen to run out of batteries, or say there's some system fault on board, these types of things can happen, right? Um, it just becomes an axle, right? And while there is the extra dead weight, it's not going to be calamitous for, say, completing the delivery, right? If you run out of battery with an electric semi, you're stuck. And now you got to get a tow, you got to send another truck out there to finish the delivery, extremely costly. With us, yes, there is an MPG hit from the extra weight, but it's not going to jeopardize the mission. So that's one big difference. The other thing around range too, just to note, is in our opinion, the big problem with range is actually not so much the range itself, but what happens at the end of that range. So one of those is, right, you potentially could get stuck. There's range anxiety there. But let's say, you're just operating it normally. You are at 10% battery. You go in for a charge. Well, now you got to wait potentially several hours for a charge. I was just actually reading a op-ed in the Wall Street Journal that followed an early adopter of an electric semi in California, and they were actually making half the deliveries they normally were, which would be a very big problem, right, in terms of how much money you can make. And so the way we get around this problem is what we do is we run swaps, right? So instead of at the end of that range having to sit and wait for that charge, they just drop off the unit. It goes and charges on our time, not on their time, right? And they get a fully charged vehicle ready to go back on the road in 4 minutes, right? And that's actually why we focus almost exclusively on long haul. Um, we believe that the way you do long haul with electric vehicles is not to wait for some magical battery technology that can pack maybe 500 600 miles in, god forbid 1,200 miles. Like that's very far in the future in terms of battery technology. What we're doing is we're just making that stop for the recharge just as low impact as possible. And then what we're having our customers do is basically just stop and swap approximately every 240 miles. So our next version of our vehicle is going to have a bigger battery pack, and that all electric range is actually going to be 240 miles. And that's how actually our customers are going to be able to do about 95% electrification on real world deliveries.
I want to get to another thing that's been a concern. You addressed it a little bit earlier, but I want to get a little bit more specific with it, and that's the
Please.
weight consideration.
Yeah, yeah,
Obviously, axle weight is one thing, but you've also got that 80,000 pound total weight. And I've got to think these batteries weigh a lot. You mentioned
oh yeah,
earlier trying to fit it in that budget. Have you taken a look at how many loads are bluntly light enough to go with this truck,
yeah.
or how are you addressing that?
No, that is how we're doing it. I mean, our whole strategy is basically we filter the trailers, right? When you look at the data from the Federal Highway Administration, what's really astounding actually is at the current vehicle weight, which is really it's going to end up being lighter in the future. It's very much at the beginning of its lightweighting journey. It can fit on 2/3 of tractor trailers today. And it's just that upper 1/3 of beverage distribution, these really heavy loads, fuel tankers. Those are the things that we wave on. But things like e-commerce, electronics, supply chain. All of these things either tend to cube out or are honestly aren't fully loading their trailers. And those are the ones that we apply ourselves to. For example, with our current customer in Arkansas and Texas, it's 24 out of 26 loads we can hop onto, and then we just skip those two every day. And that's actually how we're able to be zero payload impact too, because once again, in both of those scenarios, whether you're skipping it or you're squeezing yourself in, you're not changing how you're loading the trailer. It's the same trailer. Whereas if you have additional batteries either in the tractor or there's also some e-trailers coming out, if it's permanently in the trailer, that's now sort of like an asterisk, right, on the behavior and the way you can load that trailer. You now need to communicate with your shipper and literally the loading crew. Don't put that extra 5,000 pounds, only load it to 40,000 pounds. And if there's any communication breakdown, that's now an illegal vehicle. And even if you do it correctly, right, that's now payload that needs to be displaced into another truck. And so that increases the costs with going electric. Whereas with us, there's no displacement of load into other trucks. We just skip the ones that are too heavy. And that's really, really powerful in terms of making electric trucking economical and really low friction, right? It really is tough to route an electric truck so that it never encounters a too heavy trailer, or now you have to interact with all your shippers. It's really like a new way of operating that, in my opinion, the way I describe it is it violates sort of an implicit social contract in trucking, right? If you put 45,000 pounds in that trailer, anybody can haul it, right? And that's no longer true with electric, but it is true with Revoy. We restore that social contract.
Okay. Another big concern out there is the charging infrastructure and the power generation capability. And obviously, you're looking at a significant impact on the grid, and charging infrastructure's got to be built out. So, kind of looking at that, how does your company propose to deal with that challenge, especially in the long haul portion of the industry where these folks are crossing whole vast distances of the country?
Absolutely. Yeah, no, it's a major challenge just across the whole industry. I mean, not just trucking, passenger vehicles as well. Like that story is yet to be written. Um, and part of the problem is that there's a chicken egg problem, right? Like no one wants to build charging infrastructure if there aren't trucks on the road to utilize it. That's a bad investment, right? Like no one's going to do that. Same goes for the trucks. You're not going to buy a truck that you can't operate where you need it to, right? So it's just who moves first, right? And so what we do is we short circuit that chicken egg problem. So we deploy the charging with the vehicle. And what that allows us to do is immediately have utilization on the chargers because they're with the vehicle. And then one just important feature of the vehicle is because it is what we'll call purely additive, meaning the truck can operate just fine without it, right? It can just revert back to diesel. We can partially electrify routes. So, for example, on our route in Texas and Arkansas, we're on a 900-mile long haul lane, but we're actually starting out just on a 240-mile stretch in the middle of it. So our customer comes into our area of service, we hop on. They leave the area of service, we hop off. And so our vehicles are very tightly limited in terms of their area of operation, which means that you don't need to build a whole charging network to support these vehicles. They immediately go to an area where they just immediately have charging availability, and those chargers immediately have utilization. So that's sort of on the charger side of things. Now, on the electricity sourcing side of things, you're absolutely right. We're getting out into more rural communities where, potentially there's need for grid upgrades, although honestly, there's need for grid upgrades everywhere, coasts, big cities, everywhere. And so that is just something that I think it is a little bit unreasonable to ask for trucking fleets to get into. Essentially, you're asking them to get into electricity markets. And they never had to do that when we're talking about diesel refueling, right? There's just fuel stops everywhere. And now it's basically like they're being asked to, do all of this infrastructure work, which has never been something they've been asked to do. And I don't particularly think that's like a fair thing to ask them to do. And so that's what we provide as part of our service is we source that electricity. So if it requires infrastructure upgrades, we do just that. But one of the strategies we employ to really limit our need to upgrade, for example, substations or other grid assets, is we do on-site generation. So we're actually building a solar farm in Arkansas. It's by far the cheapest way to source electricity, and it also sidesteps the grid constraints. And so with that plus some grid, you can charge 24 hours a day at a very low rate, and also not have to source as much from the grid. And that's one really nice thing about getting into long haul is, you get out into these areas where it's not like the port of Long Beach where there is no space to put a solar farm. You're out in, rural Texas, rural Arkansas, or really wherever it may be. And yeah, there is land to build solar farms, to build generation, to build, say, natural gas with waste heat reclamation. A lot of options open up once you're out into long haul. And that's how we tackle that.
Okay. Um, I just had one other question that I was kind of curious about, and that is, I've been reading up on your technology, and there was some indication that these units would provide some more abilities beyond just the simple propulsion. Can you talk a little bit about what else these things are designed to do? Because that kind of interested me.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I mean, right now it's really a torque assist product, right? But what we want to turn it into, and what we're working on right now, in terms of advanced features, is turning it into more of a true driving assistant. And so that does include the torque assist, that is assisting them when they press that accelerator, when they press that brake pedal. And there are, safety improvements there, like we mentioned before, with merging and stopping distance. But we want to go further. And so the important feature to note on this is well, there's actually two features. The first is that we have steering on that back axle of ours, that one axle underneath the trailer. And that allows us to, one, operate it as a yard tractor, do the hookups, so you can just drive around, honestly, like a large RC car. But then on the highway, what we can do is basically do situationally aware dynamic stabilization. And the key is situational awareness. And so we have 360-degree cameras on board, that can identify other cars. It can identify where the road ends, where there's curbs, where there's buildings, where there's pedestrians, right? And what we're working on is basically, there's the classic example of going on a tight right hand turn and potentially popping the curb, right? Or perhaps scraping a sidewall on the curb and damaging the truck. Well, what we're going to be doing is using the steering and the cameras on board to find that curb and just pull the trailer around that corner, and making the trailer and the tractor actively avoidant of collisions with things in the scene. Now, if steering to avoid that curb means that there's a bit of oncoming traffic, and you would collide with that, maybe it's better to pop the curb. Or say it's a building, it's either a building, run into the corner of a building, or oncoming traffic, right? In that situation, it's better to maybe put on the parking brake and say, hey, slow down, you're going to run into something, right? That's one thing. And then also at speed on the highway, you can do really cool stuff, literally stuff that like fighter jets do, which is dynamic active stabilization. So you get hit by a gust of wind, we can go and steer and stabilize the trailer and prevent it from tipping. Or you're starting to jackknife and the front end of that trailer is starting to drift off to the side. Well, we can just pull that trailer back in line. And this can all be done with little tiny micro adjustments, oftentimes imperceptible to the driver. But basically make them safer. We internally, so we do a lot of testing internally, and we have a really excellent test pilot. Her name's Beverly. She's a 30-year industry veteran, used to haul tanker trucks, so one of the more dangerous loads. Very experienced. And one of the things we definitely, know about the industry is experience in driving really matters. Like the experienced drivers, they're the safest. They know what they're doing, and we really want to give a lot of those abilities to less experienced drivers, new drivers, especially as we hopefully get more and more drivers into the industry to help fill the labor gap, get new truckers in the industry. We want to give them a lot of those skills, that you only gain from experience, and the way we can do that is basically by putting them into the driving assistant. And so just make any driver have the skills and experience of an experienced driver. And yeah, and it's all enabled by the steering and the sensors, specifically cameras.
Okay. Well, as I said, Ian, that's all I have. Is there anything else that you want to add or you think maybe I didn't ask about that I should have?
Yeah, let's see. I think the big thing here is that I want to that I'd like to leave everyone with is, right now, electrification is really messy and complicated in commercial vehicles. And what's unfortunate about that is there's definitely some really aggressive goals out there. And it's definitely very difficult to make the economics work to comply with those goals, right? And what we really want to impress on people is that it's not a inherent feature of electric vehicles. It's just the way that the products look right now, pre-Revoy. But if we do things a little bit differently and apply new technologies, rather than just doing the same thing but electric, we can actually make it not just competitive with diesel freight, but actually a lot better, a lot safer. We can actually drive anywhere between 5 to 10% fuel savings, inclusive of our fees, and then also have a better driving experience for the driver. One thing, for example, we do just in terms of the operation of the vehicle to provide some more color is it also acts as sort of like a cruise control. So what the driver does is they get up to speed on the highway and they actually don't even need to mess with their onboard cruise control. They can just take their foot off the gas and it will actually hold speed and act as the cruise control. In that situation, it's actually 100% electric. And would love to host you for a demo ride out in California someday. But it's really cool how quiet and how low vibration the cab gets in that situation. It's extremely relaxing, and so that's just one of the things that electric can bring. And if we adopt these new technologies, we can get around the constraints that are causing the electrification journey for commercial vehicles to be so difficult right now. So yeah.
Okay, well, Ian, thank you very much for your time. I really do
Likewise.
appreciate it.
I appreciate it as well.